Hello, everyone. Are you having a good time? Fantastic. We're
Pretty busy today, huh?
It looks, actually, you look amazing. It's really great to be here. So thank you very much for being here. Here we have Martine.
Hi, everyone.
And Martine and I met here, actually, a year ago, because we met here at Pulse last year. And ever since, we've been inseparable. And, and we've gone down the same journey path, really, because we're both trying to do our little bit to contribute towards customer success here in Europe. And we've both set up our own consultancy companies. And we consider ourselves as partners. And
yes.
So we help each other, because as we saw this morning with the keynote from Dan, with customer success, we're all learning, we're all experimenting. So we're doing this together, helping each other, in order to help the customer success movement here in Europe. So there we are. And in fact, Martine, she'll be following up because I'm going to be talking about customer journeys. We're going to go on a journey together. And Martine, afterwards, in the session just after this, she'll be zooming in onto a small part of that customer journey, the internal part. And it's a very fun part because it's where the sales teams and the customer success teams get together. So I really encourage you to stay on for that as well.
Okay. Handoffs, yes.
Yeah. Great. So are you ready to journey? Yeah. Fantastic. So this is me, Captain Popeye Sue. And in fact, I founded Customer Success Europe, co-founded with Peter Lyon, who's just here sitting on the front seat here.
Wave, Peter.
There's Peter Lyon. And the idea of Customer Success Europe is to really get customer success folks like yourselves to get together to exchange. As I said, we are experimenting. And so what we want for people to do is to learn and share from their best practices, from their experiments. You don't go and learn customer success in universities or a business school. You have to get on the job and learn on the job. So that's what we're doing. So we've had 4 events so far, all of which have been taking place in Dublin. And the next one will take place here in London. So if you're interested, save the date. It's on the 15th of March. So you're all welcome to be part of that. So as you can see, we have a boat here, a ship, which I've renamed, rebaptized this, HMS Boomerang, because we're going to be taking a new spin on customer journey mapping. So excuse the pun there. We'll have several maritime references during this, so I hope you're not seasick, because I actually love the sea and I love boats. So sorry for that. So let's go forward. What we intend to do at the end of this session, our destination for this session today, is for all of us to be hands on deck and to be actually creating together a customer journey. So in order to get to that destination, we need to take these following steps. So first of all, well, what's a customer journey? Why do a customer journey? What's it all about? What are the challenges that we are facing as customer success folks in order to map out customer journeys? And then I'll be showing you a framework that I put together, which has 7 building blocks for constructing a customer journey for customer success folks. And then we'll be boomeranging, because I have this notion of boomerang customer journey. So it'll be a very full of, let's say, different pictures, different visuals, as if we're going on a journey. So you have lots of different visuals to help you see what I'm referring to. Okay? So are you ready to boomerang? Some of you have probably seen customer journey maps that look something like this, all shapes and forms, sizes, colors, whatever. It doesn't really matter what kind of visual representation you have. What matters is that you're telling the storyboard of how you're getting your customers towards their expectations and the customer outcomes. So it doesn't matter what visual representation you have, as long as all the internal actors really know how they should be on board together as a team in order to make your customers successful. I really like this. Again, this is another picture taken from my holiday snaps. So this session is like 2 in 1 because you get to see my holiday snaps as well. And this is taken from a museum in France. And this museum shows this, which I think really depicts very well what a customer journey is all about. Because this was taken from an ocean liner back in 1904 with a ship going from Le Havre in France to New York. And you can see here, it really shows how a customer journey map is really to operationalize and see a visual representation of how customers are kept on track in order to get to their final destination. The captain of this ship, Le Touraine, you can see he's actually been logging the KPIs. He's logging the longitude, he's logging the latitude. He's logging how many miles, how many knots he's actually done per day. And in the little observation, you can see he's actually detecting opportunities and risks as he's going along. So he's noting, for example, risk, icebergs ahead, risks, choppy water. And he's also noting opportunities. This is a fine weather today we're having, so this is great because we can speed the knots and therefore go faster. And in those days, back in those days, in fact, it was a real performance KPI for transatlantic ocean liners to get as fast as possible from Europe to the United States. And of course, we all know that very tragically with the outcome of the Titanic. So I think this very depicts what a customer journey is all about. Dan Steinman was in the room, but he was talking about customer success this morning being born in Europe in the 60s with the Beatles and with the Rolling Stones. And I think the captain of Le Touraine was probably one of the pioneers of customer success because he's actually doing exactly what we're doing with customer journey mapping. So to keep within the maritime theme, why do a customer journey map? Well, there are different reasons. The main reason, of course, is so that you keep your customer on track in order for them to have an optimized customer experience and to achieve their customer outcomes. And that is particularly true, we're in a world, a business world, where we have different models coming in. So you really need to be on your toes in order to know what is your competition doing, etc. The second reason, and I think this is very important, because it really, doing a customer journey map, promotes internal transparency and sponsorship. And I think that's really important. It was mentioned this morning, customer success is not the responsibility of a sole department after the contract. Customer success is a responsibility of all internal actors. And doing a customer journey map enables you to really be transparent in who is responsible for what at the different stages of that life cycle. And as a consequence of that, the third reason for mapping out a customer journey is that it enables those internal actors to adjust the customer journey whenever that is necessary to do so. So if you've mapped it out and you've got it all black and white, then if there's some kind of external environmental threat which is coming in, then this enables you to adjust it where that is necessary. And then finally, the reason is, of course, to make sure that your customers are staying on track, they're staying on course, and they're not confronting any kind of risk, like, for example, Popeye here is spotting an iceberg, and it helps you really make sure that your customers stay on track, stay longer, want to invest more in your solution, and they start advocating your solution. So that's the reason, and there was some recent research done by the TSIA very recently, which showed that out of the top performers, those top performers in that research, 100% of them had actually done a customer journey. And out of those, their retention rate was 10% higher than all the other companies who hadn't put into place a customer journey, and their expansion rate was 26% higher. So those are the reasons for really wanting to put a customer journey into place. So very quickly, what are the origins and the challenges of putting into place a customer journey? Well, I think we're often talking about customer journeys in the light of the B2C world and the customer experience. And those customer experience actors were very intent on creating a really strong brand image. Intent on creating what they called moments of truth, which were moments when the customer could decide or not whether they wanted to stay, so it's obviously in line with the retention. And also to create very positive, emotional, and rational experiences, and really touching the different touch points and the different channels along the life cycle of the customer. So in the customer success world where we are now, of course, those challenges are still true. But in addition, we have other ones. And the other ones are, of course, to create a proactive, really engagement with the customer all along the life cycle so that they actually meet their customer outcomes. So we're not just dealing about emotional experiences. We're dealing with results, business performance results. And that's one of the main challenges, how to measure those business results. And then, of course, how to scale all that and how to combine the human touch, the human engagement, with the automated engagement. And that's always very difficult. And then, of course, in your client base, not all your clients are moving and performing at the same pace. So you have some clients who adopt and perform very quickly and others who don't. So that's a great challenge. And then probably in your high-touch enterprise accounts, you probably have several different stakeholders with different objectives, different aims, different pain points. So how do you handle all that? And then the last point, and it's what I briefly mentioned just earlier, is how to maintain the agility internally between all the different actors who are contributing to the customer journey. So this is the framework. So it looks very colorful, and these are the 7 blocks, which I consider make up the customer journey. Now, we're going to go through them one by one, and then afterwards, we're going to have time to actually do this together. And so I'm going to take you through them. So first of all, the block 1, it's a bit like building Lego. Block 1 is, in fact, to segment, of course, your customer base. And within those different segmentations, you probably have different stakeholders, different sponsors, with different objectives. So you need to identify what are your types of sponsors, your types of personas, and you may have several per customer base. Once you've done that, on the right-hand side in yellow, you need to determine for those segments and for those personas, what is their expected customer outcomes? So that's important. How do you measure that? So I'm going to show you just now with an example of how I measure that using adoption and performance indicators. And then the third brick in that is once you've identified your sponsors, is to know what are the typical characteristics of those sponsors and the personas. What makes them tick? What are their pain points? What is their vision of success? Et cetera, et cetera. So just to give you an example of that, using those 3 bricks, here, for example, we have a segmentation for marketing medium touch, and we're dealing with a tool which is a lead generation tool. And here you can see we have 2 different personas. We have a marketing director sponsor, and we have a user sponsor. So what is important, of course, is when you're mapping out that the people who are actually dealing with and engaging with, what is their role? Are they an influencer? Are they a stakeholder? Are they a sponsor? And who are the users who they're probably managing, and what are the expectations of these users? So, for example, in the yellow, this is where we come to the question of customer outcomes. You can see that for our first marketing director's persona, he or she is in fact having a customer outcome, which is to increase the number of qualified leads. So how does she get there? She would need to have a performance KPI, which would represent the business outcome for that goal. So, for example, here, we increase the number of qualified leads for sales per month by 10%. That is a real KPI. And what she would be asking her team to do in adoption purposes would be say, okay, in order to get to that business goal, you need to identify X number of contacts by week in the tool. So that's clearly the adoption KPI, which she would be asking her team to do in order for herself to shine and succeed with her specific goal. And then the third aspect is what I was saying, is just to identify what are the typical characteristics of this marketing director sponsor. So, for example, they may be usually disappointed with marketing automation tools or struggling with outbound marketing, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to identify this either by internal knowledge of what you already have on the client or by doing interviews direct with the clients, of course. So those are the first 3 bricks. And then we go on, just to show you very, very quickly, you would end up with some kind of segmentation like this. We're not going to go into detail here because you have other workshops and presentations on segmentation. But ideally, you would have a segmentation, high value, medium value, and low value. And within those segmentations, you would have the different kinds of personas who are going to be impacted by your solution. Okay? So those are the first 3 bricks. And the fourth bricks, This is the macro milestone, and the customer journey timeline against which your customer journey is going to be mapped. Now, I've often seen very linear representations of such customer journeys, and which personally I find very flat. You know, we're often talking about getting from A to Z, getting from the beginning to the end. And I think that's very flat and very one-directional. So I prefer to talk about customer journey mapping with this representation of a boomerang. And this boomerang, why the boomerang? Well, obviously, at the beginning, this is the typical funnel that we get with marketing and sales teams in order to bring your customer and do the first acquisition. So that's the first stage. But what's really interesting in SaaS or recurring revenue models is this boomerang effect, because in fact, it's never ending. So we're not doing a customer journey map from A to Z. It's something, what goes around comes around. So with the boomerang, what is really important, all those really positive spiral effects, win-win, viral kind of situation which is going to happen because your customers have achieved their expected outcomes, because they are advocating for you, because they are expanding, because they're renewing. And this is why we have this, this boomerang representation of the customer journey map. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about this. So a lot of the time, we see customer journey mapping with, for example, this framework, which you've probably seen because this, again, was something which was communicated by the TSIA. And for those of you who were here at Pulse last year, they very kindly gave us a book on this subject. So land, adopt, expand, and renew. So, of course, that is a framework which is very orientated from the vendor point of view. You know, what am I going to get out of this as a vendor in terms of value? And then, coming again from the TSIA, they had something which is more customer-orientated, and this is called PIMO. So, first of all, the customer will plan what he wants to achieve, and then we'll actually implement the success plan, measure, and then optimize. So again, that's another possibility of milestones, but I prefer to call this the customer boomerang milestone. And so after the implementation, I've actually divided that into different steps. And in order to make sure we have this spin on the boomerang, and that we're also getting all those positive effects, the viral effects, we need to split it up into stages. And for me, those stages are, first of all, make sure that your users are adopting, of course, your tool, and then that they actually are performing with your tool. So what is the distinction between the two? The adoption stage is usually if you have a team of, let's say, in the example with the marketing, the lead generation tool, you have a team of 10 people. The adoption stage will be getting all of those individuals on board to use your tool on a daily basis, part of their routine. The performance stage is when all those 10 people collectively are creating performance KPIs, so you need to be able to measure those. And then the transformation stage, this is a bit like what Geoffrey Moore was referring to this morning in the keynote. You know, he was talking about the J-graph. So this is when your customers are actually going beyond the J-graph and actually achieving transformation, and they probably also have an ROI to share with you. So that's a fantastic business case. And then, of course, they're advocating for you. They're probably participating in events. They're probably making testimonials and making webinars for you, whatever. And this is then creating, as a last step, the boomerang effect, which is creating all those wonderful things that we want to achieve. So that's the milestones. And then we have the actual customer journey mapping, which is going to continue in the last 3 steps of this framework. So the 5th one is, okay, what is the required customer experience for the sponsor and persona? And I divide customer experience into 2. The first one is the user experience. So in terms of your product, how is your product organized or maybe funneled in order to be accommodated by the different personas who you have? So that's something we're seeing more and more. We're actually seeing customer success integrated within the tool. So that it's easier and more user-friendly and obvious for your users to know what to do. And then the other associated thing with the customer experience is the appropriate experience. So that means basically, what is the methodology which you should be doing? What is your speech which you should be doing with these customers so that you're only talking to them about things which are relevant to them? So for example, in the lead generation example that I gave to you, you could have sales users and you could have marketing users using the same tool. So you're not going to have the same pitch for both of them. So that's part of what I call the appropriate experience. And then the sixth one, once you've done that, is to really map out your engagement model according to the segmentation and according to the persona. And within that engagement model, there are 3 different subsets. The first one is everything which you plan to be engaged from a scheduled point of view or unscheduled point of view. So unscheduled are the things you know are going to happen at some point, but you're not sure exactly when. And then, of course, you have those where you have the one-to-one touch, the personal human touch, or automated, and how you're going to scale the automated. And then, of course, all along, as we go along, like our captain of the La Touraine, we are detecting constantly risks and opportunities as we go along. And then, and only then, once you've done all that, you can see these first 6 bricks are all very customer-focused. And only then you do the last brick, which is 7, and it's when then you align all that with your internal organization, processes, and tools, and of course, the information, the data, which you will be collecting all along. And I think a lot of the time with customer journey mapping, we do this the other way around. We first of all start off with our internal processes and then try and impose our internal processes onto the customer. And that's not always what the customer wants, and it doesn't always correspond to the customer experience. And I think it kind of reflects what Geoffrey Moore was saying this morning, and that is that we, a lot of the time we're still operating in a world where demand excess is actually exceeding the supply, and we're still thinking in this mindset of the supply chain where we're pushing out products, and as a consequence, our processes as well. So I think that's a mindset which we need to change. So I say, yeah, this is the last one I call the opt-in, and the opt-in is an acronym because obviously we want your customers to opt in for life with your solution. And so opt-in means, first of all, organization, processes, tools, and information. So that's the framework. And then, of course, all along, we're going to be continually collecting data and making consequent actions, following up from the data that we're reading. And, of course, using metrics to detect those opportunities and risks as we go along. Okay? So just to show you how that is all orchestrated. So, for example, here we have the post-contract part of our boomerang. And you can see that after the first 3 bricks on the bottom there, we are at the milestone of adoption, which is the first one, how to get your users, your individuals using your tool. So what we'll be doing at that stage, that particular milestone, okay, what is the required customer experience, user experience, and appropriate experience for the persona in question at that point? And what are we doing in terms of engagement? And how is all that aligned with our internal organization? Similarly, again, we come to the next step, and we can only start measuring the performance KPIs, so the business outcomes, once the adoptions have been put into place. So that's really important, et cetera, et cetera. And in order for us to get this spiral, positive, win-win situation that we're looking for, we really need to go through those steps one by one. We can't try and achieve the advocacy if we haven't gone through the adoption, the performance, and the transformation. Okay? So that's the framework. Now, you have some worksheets here which reflects what we can see here. And this is an Excel file. I mean, we all love Excel files. We're still using Excel files. I can give you this Excel file if you're interested afterwards. And it basically just maps out exactly what we've just seen from the 4th brick onwards. And there is a little prerequisite, and the prerequisites are the first 3 bricks, of course. So you can see here in the first column, where it's very bright green, you can see we have the macro milestones of the boomerang. And at the end, after the contract signature, you can see those milestones of adoption, performance, transformation, and advocacy. And then in column 5, this is you can see where we have the required customer experience. So from both a user experience and an appropriate experience point of view per persona. Usually in customer success, we're speaking with a stakeholder or a sponsor. So it's important to know what is the required outcome of the stakeholder and the sponsor, and what is the required outcome for the people who will be involved with your tool. So here you can see a few examples. You have the examples, you have exactly the same thing, which we can see here on the screen. And then in column 6, this is the engagement model. So you see how you'll be engaging across those different phases of the Boomerang customer journey. And in blue are all the ones which are automated, and in gray are the ones which are one-to-one. So that's how you're going to be mapping for that persona. And then finally, how all this is implemented, internally with your organization processes and across the different internal departments, so sales, marketing, products, etc., etc. And in yellow, just after this session, we're going to see an example of that with Martine, because we're going to be seeing the handover between sales and customer success. So that's the framework which we're going to be doing afterwards. And in terms of representing this visually for the customer journey, this is just an example of my Boomerang with a little bit more detail. Obviously, you can't really put up on a wall the Excel file which I just showed you because it's not very readable. It's something which you do internally, but it might be a good idea to have something like this on the wall so all the internal actors know exactly who's responsible for what, and on a very macro level, what are the expectations of the customer in blue, and what would be done internally with our teams in black, just underneath, okay? So that's an example for a marketing persona for medium touch, and you can have a Boomerang for each segment and for each persona type that you've identified. So that's how I propose to represent this visually. And then what you would do is you would be having playbooks and the processes which are then attached to this kind of macro overview and which would be documented internally. Okay? So the song for this was from U2, Where the Streets Have No Name, but I think that probably we could have had a better song, sort of Baby Come Back or something like this. So what we're going to do now is Boomerang together. So I suggest you have an example on the sheet that you've got the handouts in front of you. I suggest that you get into groups, so on the tables that you are, either as a table or in smaller groups, whichever you wish. And then at the back of that, you have an empty framework where you can work together on. And I would suggest, for simplicity, is what you could do is probably imagine that you are a vendor of something which we all know, a CRM software, and that the persona that you have is a sales persona. And that will take us to the nice transition for the next session with Martine. And during that time, I'll be very pleased to circulate and come around, answer, or just learn from you as well, because you've probably got other ideas. So that's really important. And Martine will be joining me as well. So please go ahead. Thank you very much for your attention.
Maybe I have some questions.
Yes. Do you have any questions? Because I forgot to say at the very beginning, with the Slido. So I don't know if you actually used the Slido. Have you used the Slido for the questions?
I'm sorry to cut. Does anybody have worksheets?
Yes. Do we have some more worksheets? Great. We have a whole packet over here, so that's good. Okay. Are there any questions? Maybe I could just take the questions now if you wanted, rather than the Slido.
Over here.
Yeah? Okay. So what are the most common mistakes when putting together a customer journey map? Well, I think a lot of the time it's because you have a focus internally. So you have a focus saying, right, these are my current processes. This is my current organization. And you're mapping out your customer journey from your point of view, from a vendor point of view. And I think that misses the point, and it probably misses how you can optimize the customer journey for your customer. What is your opinion on interactive versus static customer journey maps? Okay. I've never actually experienced, that's an interesting question. I've never actually experienced interactive. I don't know who was asking this question. No, there's no owner of this question. It's a very interesting question. I've never actually experienced that myself. So if you can tell me a little bit more about that, as I circulate, whoever asked that question, I'd be very pleased to find out. But it sounds a very interesting concept, I must agree. How can you share your thoughts on validation and verification of your customer journey from your customers' perspective? Yeah, that's a good question. What I do for that, and it kind of relates to the framework that I was talking to you about, with the adoption and performance KPIs. And what I do is make sure that we're in agreement. We have kind of a contract. It's like a marriage agreement, if you like, saying, okay, what are your adoption KPIs and what do you hope to achieve in terms of adoption by such and such a date? And then we measure that. We measure that they're actually online and on track, rather, with their adoption KPIs. And it's only then, only once they've done the adoption, that they can actually start to measure the performance KPIs. So that's what I do. What is an accepted frequency of interaction with a customer? Well, I think that really depends on the segments that you're in, and it depends on how you're going to scale that customer journey and the engagement model. So I think it really depends on what is required also with the customer in question. So if you have, for example, a customer who you can see is doing really well, adopting really well, and you can even adjust your engagement model. You can even adjust the frequency at which you're actually engaging with that customer. You know, there's no point in rolling out the red carpet for the customer if you see that they're really on track. So that's very important to keep this in mind and to scale as you go along. And you can put them in different cohorts depending on the degree of success that you can see that they're actually celebrating. So I think it really depends, and this is why you have to track them all the time in order to know where they are with their success plans. Okay? So I think now it would be a good idea if we can actually go to this hands-on exercise. We'll be circulating with Martine. So if you have any questions or any more ideas, any of your own experiences, I'd be really happy to hear those. So thank you very much and have fun.